well, speaking of guest, we have a driver who's been big in the short track world. I don't know if that works. Big in the short world. He has a huge following on YouTube. He's a streamer. He's a driver that represents the wrong vodka because it's not Big Machine vodka. None other than Landon Huffman here on the Money Lap Live. Welcome to the show, my man. We talked to Dale Earnhardt Jr. earlier, who's one of the owners of the Cars Tour. It was really a great conversation. But for you race in the Cars Tour. You'll be racing there next year. You are so involved in the short track world. Just want to continue that conversation with someone who's at the level of driving these cars, man. What does it mean to see the Cars Tour expand and for them to announce the sponsorship and all they're trying to do with the Cars Tour for you?
It's pretty awesome, actually. First of all, thank you for allowing me to come on here and see your two beautiful faces. I appreciate that. It's been I've been keeping up with you guys, so it's pretty cool to finally get a chance to do this. But yes, fresh announcement, Cars Tour, ZMAX on board as a title sponsor. I'm sure you guys have already talked to Dale about all the ins and outs of that, but we have an awesome schedule again for next year. I'll be full-time on the tour. Actually, the first time I've been full-time and running a complete schedule. This past year, I kind of joined several races into the year, and it kind of worked out where I ran the full season for Nelson, but I actually haven't ever ran a full season in the Cars Tour. So this will be my first, and a lot of cool new announcements and new stuff going on with the tour, second year for the ownership group. So I'm excited to see what happens.
Awesome.
What are you most looking forward to, on this schedule about tracks and feel thoughtful and assessing the selection of track and figuring out, putting that all together from the business perspective, but from the racer, what kind of stands out in terms of this in the schedule?
Well, we have a good diversity. We have a very good diverse short track selection here in the Southeast. I mean, that's one of the cool parts about the Cars Tour schedule. I know a lot of people were worried that, the move in new ownership would take the Cars Tour away from its roots. And I've talked about this before several times. I do think that they're going to elevate the series. They already have, obviously, but they're going to continue to elevate the series. And I think one of their main focuses is to keep the series at a grassroots level, which means that we're not going to potentially, I mean, I guess in the future we possibly could, but they're not just going to pull us away from the Hickories and the Southern Nationals and take us to the Richmonds and the Bristols and, Martinsville, things of that nature, which although those would be very cool races to run in a late model stock car, I think that they've done a good job at keeping the series grounded at the tracks that we are used to racing at. And as far as diversity goes with those tracks, I mean, we have places like New River, All American Speedway, Florence Speedway, Southern National even now is getting to that point, and Caraway also is sort of inching into that category of being very worn out, abrasive, cheese grater type tracks where you kind of have to ride around and it's a lot of tire strategy involved. And then we go to places like Dominion Raceway, which is insanely fast, like way too much load for a late model stock car, I think, but it's a lot of fun. And our late model stock cars keep getting faster and faster, but you go to those places and it makes you wonder about, right front suspension and rolling a tire off of a wheel and things of that nature. But we have a lot of options, with fresh gripped up pavement that provide great racing, fast racing. Tri-County Speedway is one of them where it's multi-groove. You can move around, top to bottom there. North Wilkesboro is getting repaved, so we kind of have the glitz and glamour of going to a place that's big time, and we're there during All-Star Weekend, which is also, a pretty badass deal. So, a lot of differences between tracks from top to bottom in the schedule, but at the same time, we still are staying with that grassroots feel and not getting away from what makes the series so great.
That's really, I think what Dale alluded to as well is like trying to keep it in that region and not make travel costs too much. The Cars Tour stems from, I believe, is like the Hooters Pro Cup era, right? The early 2000s. Yep. And one of the interesting things back then was when we were all watching it on TV and that sort of stuff was it was a series that had a couple drivers who that was their main job. That was their thing. I think you are one of the rare drivers in short track world, but there's more and more of you now. There's a lot of you in dirt racing that are treating this as a career, as a place to be. You're going to be running modifieds, I believe, as well next year. But how has that been working for you at the Cars Tour level with them, what they're doing? I'm not going to ask you, hey, how much money are you making? But my point being, with YouTube and all you're doing, man, is it work? Is it a viable place for a driver like yourself to treat it, as a career destination and to make a career and be in that position where you can do this as a full-time thing and be able to sustain it?
It's turning into that, and it's unconventional. It takes an unconventional approach. I mean, I think in the Hooters Pro Cup days, purse was a big factor. You could race for purse, and that was also during the boom of NASCAR where every series was healthy. So you've seen that a lot at the short track level, but every series was healthy. Goodies Dash Series, for instance. My dad made a living in the Goodies Dash Series for 10 years and brought Toyota into the sport at the time, but everything was booming. I mean, there was companies wanting to be involved at every level. And obviously, as you guys know, I mean, we transitioned into a period where costs have skyrocketed and things have gotten a little out of hand at times, but it's also difficult to put the money together in this day and age, like, versus 10, 15 years ago, 20 years ago. But at the short track level, obviously with the new ownership group, they're bringing a lot of eyeballs to what we're doing. So naturally, it's a little bit easier to sell sponsorship and market the series and the races as individual races now versus like a full season package even. So that's been nice. But I guess my approach and me kind of working into this situation where, yes, I am able to do this for a living, which is crazy to even think about for me because I've dreamed of trying to be a NASCAR driver. I watched my dad race for a living for his entire career and then work in the industry. I've had an opportunity to race some truck races and some ARCA races, and it just didn't work out. I was struggling in, back of the pack equipment, and I'd started spotting for a living. That was what I was doing. I was spotting trucks in Xfinity and ARCA, and then COVID happened and everything stopped. We all started streaming, started doing all this stuff online, and one thing led to another. I got back in a race car because I was practically done and started racing locally at Hickory again. Spiraled into me restoring the race shop that I'm in now, which was my dad's old shop. And, one thing after another kind of started snowballing. Won the championship at Hickory. Then I got the deal in the car store last year. So the YouTube channel's growing. I mean, it's just been one thing after another that's sort of helped turn into this perfect storm of where I'm at now. And I'm definitely not where I need to be, but I'm on that path to be able to do this full time and work in my shop and work on my race cars. The sponsor stuff is getting better and we're able to supplement my program with that sponsorship, but ultimately the content is the key. I mean, that's what's keeping people there. You can sell sponsorship. Like last year I sold a corporate level sponsorship for basically Hickory Motor Speedway racing weekly every week just because of the online reach, so it's an interesting world that I'm living in right now, but I'm trying to continue to learn, and I don't have it completely figured out. I don't know if anybody does really, but learning one step at a time.
Well, you're doing what
awesome.
nobody else is doing, and that's important, and that's you're paving your own way. And I would imagine that the success of someone like Josh Berry, who has a unique story, right? He wasn't an overnight success getting into NASCAR. He had to grind it out for a long time driving late models before he really got a break, even though he was right there. That's got to give you some hope in knowing that you probably have a longer runway than you think, that you could, maybe I don't know if your end goal is to make it back to NASCAR, but boy, I feel like with the platform you're building and the success that you're going to see when you start winning races, more races than you're already winning, those opportunities will probably present themselves.
Just as you guys are. I mean, I know that both of you have worked really hard to establish yourself in the industry. You want to be a race car driver. That's what you've, tried to do your whole life as I have. And the end goal is always to be able to make it to the highest level of NASCAR, right? Well, as I've gotten older, I've realized that, okay, well, as long as I'm racing, then I'm pretty happy with that, like it's still fun. I'm having a lot of fun. So as long as I can have fun, support my family, and be competitive and race up front, have a shot at winning, and get to do it with the people that I enjoy, my family and friends, and my crew guys, people I've grown up with, that's a win for me. And naturally, I would love to make it to the next level. I mean, if I have an opportunity to do so, that would be awesome. I would definitely jump all over that, and it would be a blessing. But at the same time, I think I used to worry about those things all the time, and as soon as I stopped worrying about that and just started worrying about what was in front of me and capitalizing and making the most out of that and enjoying it, then everything kind of started falling into place. So I've learned
Yeah.
that the less you stress about that, I guess, in my experience, the better it ends up working out for you, and just taking it one step at a time.
What do you think about and I don't want to, I know that you've listened to us. I don't know if you've listened to this whole show, because we touched on it earlier in terms of the short track pipeline and NASCAR as this mass property pulling talent from outside the sport, but then also needing this pipeline to go, of endemic drivers and crew members, straight from our endemic form of racing, which is short track stock car racing, into NASCAR. What do you think about the Cars Tour and short track stock car racing as a pipeline for young talent, and not just, drivers and crew members, and how we foster that talent? I'd love to hear your thoughts there.
I think the Cars Tour will play a crucial role in developing drivers. I mean, it already does, but I also think that what people have to understand, and we've gotten away from that at the local level, is a series like the Cars Tour, in order for it to succeed, it can't just be quote unquote a development series. Like, it has to have people like myself, Josh Berry, Brendan Queen, guys that um, can find a home in a series or give the series some identity. Like, I think that's one thing that's hurt short track racing in the last 10 years is we've lost identity. You go to a local track. When I was growing up racing at Hickory, I raced against the Knipes and the Setzers and the Houstons and their sons, the third generation of that family. And I was a third generation, Huffman racing at the track. So all these fans were coming out and supporting because they had a family to pull for, or they've watched this development over a course of time, and they're fans of maybe my father or their grandfather. And that's what kept the track healthy. That's what kept short track racing healthy, is the fans could relate to the people that were on the racetrack. And then when you have a kid come in, and there's nothing wrong with that at all, but if you have a kid come in, he's only there for 1 year and then he moves on, they don't develop any relationship, from a fan driver standpoint with that kid. And then they're accelerated up the ladder so fast that it just doesn't even matter. So we have this large disconnect between, fans on Saturdays and Sundays at the high levels of NASCAR versus the short track level. And I think the Cars Tour has started to develop the identity that it needs in order for a fan to relate to a driver, follow that driver on a consistent basis. And then if that driver gets an opportunity to move up the ladder, like, a guy did in the 70s, 80s, 90s, early 2000s, then that driver already has a large fan base or people standing behind him that can relate to them and support them on Saturdays and Sundays. So there's a disconnect, but I think the Cars Tour provides that reconnection that is needed. But I also think that the Cars Tour is a very strong tool to develop a young driver. And even me, man, I'm 27 years old and I've raced locally pretty much my whole life. I get to travel on the Cars Tour this year, and I went to like 8 new racetracks. I seen myself grow as a race car driver just in the 14 races that I ran this year. Got a lot better. I mean, I ran well at Martinsville, just a lot of things that were new and first for me, I experienced on the Cars Tour. And I feel like I could also be, someone where if a young kid comes in like a William Sawalich or somebody of that nature, Connor Zilic, for instance, they see how I race people in the series and the example that I set, and they also return the favor and then get commended for it. So those are the people that are going to find success, moving up the ladder.
Mm-hmm. You made something real quick that stood out to me. So I've had this thought when it comes to the ladder system, and we've had lots of conversations, Parker and I, and I've had this conversation with NASCAR executives that are in charge of the ladder system. So there's a lot of really unique and creative ideas that are out there that I think the ladder system will get an overhaul here in the coming years. And one of the things that I have thought about the ladder system that kind of oversimplifies it, but is, very similar to iRacing, where it's like, I thought that you should not get a Truck Series license or an Xfinity Series license or a Cup Series license without a certain safety rating. Think of it, right? Like without wrecking a certain amount. And I think even oversimplifying it to a point of you need to have a certain number of starts and actually even performance objectives, right? Like if you, in order to move up to the Xfinity Series, you have to have a minimum of 50 starts and a top 10 finish in the Truck Series. Like just plain and simple. Like I know equipment is equipment and there's people out there grinding it out there, but at the end of the day, it's like you got to have a top 10 somewhere, right? You got to go to Talladega. You got to prove that you can finish well to get to the next level. And the thing that you said that kind of stood out to me is you have drivers that are just skipping through these ranks so fast, right? Because they only have I'm going to throw out a bunch of scenarios. It's like they only have so much money to spend, right? Whether it's their parents' money or if they have legitimate sponsorship, they got enough money that they can get to NASCAR, and we got to get there now, right? Because I'm old enough, right? I'm 16 or I'm 18, so I can run a truck. So why am I messing around with these late models when I've got the money? I'm old enough, I can do it, right? Where if we had a ladder system that literally forced these drivers to spend time at these levels and built this brand recognition and their namesake and their equity at these levels, not just their driving experience, right? But their actual, enterprise value at these levels before they could move up. If that was part of the ladder, or that, that would be sort of a side effect of this requirement to have so many Cars Tour starts and so many, super late model starts and certain objectives before they could get to the next level. It would kind of keep them at that grassroots level for longer, which, could make those series healthier in terms of the brand recognition.
No, I agree with you completely. I have another scenario for you though. And now that you bring that up, it just reminded me of an experience I've went through, and I'd be interested to hear both of your opinions on this, especially saying that, basically what you just mentioned, which I do agree with. It would make the series healthier if people were forced to develop at a level where they're actually going to develop, not thrown to the fire where they just go out there and make, it devalues our larger series, honestly, whenever someone's just thrown to the fire and something, they just don't perform. But I'll give you this scenario. So, here I am, 2017, going into 2018. I've raced locally my whole life. I come from a racing family. I've struggled and worked really hard to try to find money. I had a marketing degree from UNC Charlotte. I've done all these things to try to line myself up so that I could, I sold some of my late model stuff, tried to put myself in a position to find some money to run some truck races. I drove for Mike Mittler at Bristol in 2017. I ran 20th, old SP2 motor, didn't tear anything up, didn't hit anything, finished on the lead lap. Then went to Martinsville, was running in the top 10 with like 15 to go in a Mike Mittler truck. And I ran in the top 15 all day, finished 17th. I got knocked out of the way towards the end, but I had two very good starts in subpar equipment at that time, and I was very proud of that. I had a pretty big sponsor compared to what I had before to give me money to go to Dover in 2018 at the start of the year. And I had Bristol and Martinsville under my belt. I understand Dover is a different animal. I get it. But it would have put me in a competitive truck for the first time ever, basically. And here I have worked all my life to have this opportunity, and NASCAR wouldn't approve me to go to Dover. And yet someone like, I'm not going to throw a name out there, but you have a number of people at that time that were running like ARCA at Talladega, and then they would go get in like a start and park truck and run like 30 laps and be 8 laps down in the 30 laps they ran. But then they get approved because they've ran 3 truck races and they've done this and this and this. But me, I couldn't get approved, and I fought it and fought it and fought it, and I couldn't get approved. Well, I ended up losing that sponsor. They sponsored somebody else for Dover. and I never got, I never had that opportunity, or that opportunity was stripped away from me. And it kind of just, I never really recovered with that path that I was on. But my point is, I think that I agree with what you're saying, but there's also a barrier whenever you have someone like myself, and even you guys have worked really hard to try to find money and have struggled at times to do that as well. But you guys were fortunate to have the experience early on to where you never really had that approval issue. Where for me, I feel like I was more than capable of going to Dover and being, productive in a truck and running, as good as a truck or whatever, learning and, not doing anything stupid, basically. And, because I'd never been to any track larger
Yeah.
than a half mile, I couldn't go. So it was
Well,
very like, it sucked.
I think
So, I mean, there's two sides
so
to the thing.
Well, my point about this ladder system, though, and what I think it needs is I think that NASCAR needs to find a way to make the ladder system as clear and black and white as possible, so that in that scenario, you knew before you got in the truck in Martinsville what it was going to take for you to get to Dover, to Charlotte, to Daytona, right? I
Yeah,
need to get so many
agreed.
starts. I need to get, I have to get one top 15 finish before I can move to the next. It's as clear as day, because right now it's totally subjective. You're absolutely right? Like they didn't. You were beholden to, at the time, probably Brett Bodine or whoever was in charge of the approval process, and
Yeah.
it's a very subjective process, right? And I went through a lot of the same things early in my career, right? They had, I was driving for Hendrick, but I had to jump through hoops, and we had to run certain races before I could move up to 1.5-mile tracks. And I think that for the NASCAR endemic pipeline and ladder system, I think it would benefit NASCAR to have just a very clear and challenging set of rules to get approved to the next level that keeps drivers, in those series for a certain amount of time to get their experience. For anything outside of NASCAR, because obviously we still want drivers to come from other series, a V8 Supercars driver or an F1 driver or somebody like that to pop in and be able to run NASCAR. I think that's valuable to the sport to an extent. I don't have a solution or an answer to how that would work. I do think that, that those could be subject to a review, right? But the clearest
Committee.
The clear way for a driver without experience in NASCAR to get up through the ladder system should be black and white, and it should be something that ultimately that's content, right? That's something for fans to follow. That's something for drivers to follow, for sponsors to invest in, for drivers to invest in, and teams and manufacturers to know, like, hey, when this guy or gal gets to that next level, they're eligible, right? I think that that could be a really valuable part of our ecosystem.
Can I butt in here? Real quick?
Go ahead.
First of all, there's a key strategy if you don't want to be able to get a single word in. Have two Landons on the money lap. And you'll never have the chance to speak. I think it's been 25 minutes since I've said a word, so I love it. It's been a great discussion. We should point out, Landon, that your idea there of sort of how do you get the international drivers or the drivers from other disciplines that have been very successful in, that was a question from YouTube, from our comments there. So that some of the live viewers out there, thank you for that question. I don't think there's a clear-cut answer to both of you. I don't think we're going to solve this right here, but to give it some sort of, I guess, an abstract away from just short track racing, in the Formula Car world, and especially F1 right now, they've done an amazing job of this. And we've talked about it, Landon Cassill, on this podcast, about how it's very clear cut and dry how you move up, how the license system works. And especially as you go to Formula One, when you look at the super license, it has areas where it doesn't quite make as much sense. Finishing top 3 in IndyCar is not nearly as high as finishing top 3 in F3, basically, because they value their FIA series over, their non-FIA series. It is a very clear cut and dry system that rewards performance and keeping, you have reprimands that can hold you back and that sort of thing. So I think there's something out there for the short track world that leads to the NASCAR pipeline. Landon Huffman, putting all that aside, putting the Cars Tour aside, one of the biggest, I think trends right now in all short track racing, aside from great racing, is fighting. There is endless fights right now. It seems like if there's a short track race that's on Flow, Racing America, or just streamed to your local YouTube page like Money Lap, it's going to end in a fight. What is going on in the short track world right now, my man? What is happening here?
You don't see my ass fighting.
Yeah,
I'll
well,
tell you
good.
that.
You shouldn't be. Yeah.
I mean,
Connors Tour
I
has a
think
penalty now for it, basically.
yes, I mean they should. They're listen, racing is you guys know, racing is emotional. There's been times where I've sat at a race car and I would consider myself, well, I don't know. I could get heated. But in a race car, when something happens to you, you turn into a different person sometimes. Like I don't even know how to explain it really, but if especially in my own race cars, like if somebody hits my car, even if they just run into me, like sometimes I'm fine with it. Other times it's just like a switch that goes off in your head and you're like, nope, back off the ledge, like back off the ledge. Remember, and when I was younger, I struggled with that, man. Like I struggled with that so much. But I would like to think that I've matured in some ways as I've gotten older. And I feel like right now the issue is just I'm not so sure that those fights have not always been there. Now it's just getting uh, documented and recorded and posted everywhere, and that's like the only thing that's getting shared a lot of times. So it's unfortunate you have people like that in all, maybe not all forms of racing, but NASCAR has always been very blue collar at a short track level, and I think it's unacceptable 99% of the time. I feel like if anybody should be aggravated at each other, it's a driver and a driver. My crew, you will never see my crew ever engage with another race car or another crew or anything of that nature. My dad's always brought me up that way. And I feel like most people that come from a racing family, especially racing families that have found success in the sport, uh, albeit short track level, on up the ranks, you won't see that type of reaction most of the time, if not all the time. But there's always some bad apples, and unfortunately, just those things are getting recorded right now and put out there.
Interesting. And that does make sense. It's just more publicized at this point because it just seems like every big event, and one that actually just happened this past week, and I want your opinion on just sort of the track. Southern National, you mentioned Cars Tours going there. They did something really cool, and I just wanted you to sort of give us your opinion on how you think this would work, where they paved just the top lane, and then they put like PJ1 on it or something. And did you see all this that went down?
Yeah, so they put sealer in the top lane, so it wasn't paved.
Oh,
It was
sealer.
just like
Okay, it wasn't paved.
Yeah, they just sealed it, which it looked paved. I'll give you that.
Yeah.
So they sealed it, and then the lane down they put PJ1, which I'll commend Mike Diaz for the effort. It was a great attempt. But historically, when we doctor racetracks, how well does that work for the racing? It usually never works out, in my opinion. So, like, I commend the effort. I think it would have been cool to see someone try to go up there, but nobody went up there. So, I mean,
Yeah.
if they were going to do it, in my opinion, they should have put cones out and made everybody run through the PJ1 in practice for like 20 minutes or something and just
That's
see if it worked. Yeah, I mean,
Mhm.
if it did work, then somebody might have went up there. But also, a track like Southern National, it's one groove, but it's also the shortest way around. I mean, looking at this video here. If you were to go up there, you're making the track like a third longer than it actually is. So I mean,
Yeah.
even if it was really gripped up there, I'm not even sure how much better it would be. So I commend them for the effort. I'm not a big fan of doctoring racetracks. I think when the racetrack evolves naturally and wears naturally, if it wears into a one group track, okay. If not, it doesn't. But as a track wears naturally, at least in the late model stock world, usually the racing takes care of itself and works out. And as you've seen in this race, I mean, it was a badass finish, and they never once touched the PJ1. So
I hear you. No, I just thought it was interesting. I think it's cool. I think it, is something that I feel like Texas could possibly need something like this, the mile and a half, but the distance you mentioned, it's the same problem they have there. There's 80 feet of great asphalt you'll never ever use. So, my man, thank you for coming on here. This has been awesome. Best of luck in the off season and into next season, man. It's maybe we can get you back on to give us an update on how it's all going in the short track world. But keep up the good work.
Yeah, had a lot of fun. Thank you guys. Appreciate it. Keep doing what you're doing.
Hey there. I got a request. Can you please like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon below to be alerted to when we post all this great content? And really, it's a pact, because if you do that, then we'll keep posting great content. Also, join us on Wednesdays from 12 to 3 p.m. Eastern Time for the live show, Money Lap Live. We interview people from around the motorsports world and just talk all things motorsports. It's awesome. Join us there.